That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Miracle Club, which I believe is the 6th theatrical feature from Irish director Thaddeus O'Sullivan, just premiered at the 2023 Tribeca Film Festival. It is being released courtesy of Sony Pictures Classics, July 14th, 2023.
The director?
Thaddeus O'Sullivan.
What have they done?
A lot of TV, some documentary work, several other films that I have not seen, although I do remember passing it up on the shelf to rent a lot. Ordinary Decent Criminals, starring Kevin Spacey back in 2000, and The Heart of Me, starring Olivia Williams and Helena Bonham Carter.
The story. There's just one dream for the women of Ballygar to taste freedom, to win a pilgrimage to the sacred French town of Lourdes. I thought this movie's heart was in the right place, but it's a no for me.
I agree. It's a bit trite and a little superficial. That said, I think there's a trio of good performances that have some nice moments. There's some poignancy there, but I think that's solely due to how good these women are. Other than that, it's a bit hokey.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on for it to amount to something very basic.
Sure.
Okay, so it's the late 60s in Ireland, and there's a woman named Maureen who has died. But the film focuses on Maureen's best friend, Maggie Smith.
Lily.
Maureen's estranged daughter, Linney.
Chrissie.
Who shows up to the funeral like a couple hours too late because she now lives in Boston, I believe.
Kind of like Beau's Afraid.
Yes. And she hasn't seen her mom or been back to this town in 40 years. So when she shows up, everyone's like, oh. So there's her. There's Kathy Bates.
Eileen.
Who we find out was best friends with Linney back in the day, which we need to talk about. And there's a fourth woman, a young lady named
Dolly, played by Agnes O'Casey, who's making her debut.
So that lady, the young lady Agnes, plus Kathy Bates, plus Maggie Smith, they're all in like a musical group. And they all want to go on this pilgrimage because I didn't know anything about Lourdes, but apparently there's some miracle that occurred there.
Yes, but there's a very famous film called The Song of Bernadette, which Jennifer Jones won her Oscar for in 1943, directed by King Vidor, who saw the Virgin Mary, and it's kind of become this mecca since, when did that happen? 1858, for people to go and try to be healed by. There are other films that have dealt with this. I highly recommend Jessica Hausner's 2009 film, Lourdes, starring Léa Seydoux. That is a much better exploration, I think, of some of the themes going on.
Anyway, people go to this place to hope that a miracle occurs. So Maggie Smith wants to go because there's something wrong with her leg. Like one of her legs is shorter than the other.
Is that a clubfoot?
No, clubfoot is when your foot's kind of like misshapen. No, she's just one leg.
She's a short leg.
Yeah, but it's also like she's also old as hell. So I don't know, like she's not long for this earth anyway. Then Kathy Bates knows she has breast cancer.
Well, she's found a lump.
She's found a lump, but she doesn't see the doctor, so she doesn't know for sure.
So
and then Agnes wants to go because her son is mute. Yeah.
But Maureen's funeral has been turned into, has been collapsed with this planned celebration, this contest. And the winners of this talent show contest get 2 tickets to Lourdes.
I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's not clear to me how they all ended up getting tickets because the winner of the contest is not one of these ladies, but the winner gives the ticket to Agnes because she says, oh, your son needs it more than my son does.
Her name's Dolly. The actress's name is Agnes.
Oh. But then Maggie has a ticket. Kathy Bates doesn't have a ticket, so she's asking the priest, please find a way for me to go. And Linney, because she hadn't seen her mom in 40 years, the mom wasn't sure if the daughter would show up. But in the event she did, she left her a letter saying she loved her and apologized, and that there's something for her in the top drawer of her dresser. So when Linney gets this envelope, it's filled with money, I think pictures, and a trip to Lourdes. So don't know why the mom was going, I guess for whatever ended up killing her ass, but Linney says, I don't want it, to the priest. So the priest is like, are you sure your mom wanted you to go? It's not all about miracles. Sometimes you can like it's about forgiveness,
reconciliation.
But she's like, I'm sure I don't want to go. So the priest gives it to Kathy Bates. So now Kathy Bates, Maggie Smith, and Agnes are on this bus, and the bus takes off, and then all of a sudden it comes to a screeching halt, and there's Laura Linney standing in front of it with her suitcase. So I guess she decided she wanted to go. They make this really long trip, which just occurs from one scene to the next.
Basically.
They get there and they realize that all of this is some bullshit because Kathy Bates talks to one of the employees of the, I don't know what a church. Mm-hmm. Wherever they are, they have these baths with this unclean water everyone's dipping into, which we need to talk about. And Kathy Bates asked the lady, oh, how many miracles happen here? And they tell her, like, since 1958... 1858, only like 62 miracles have happened. So basically, it's not going to happen for you. And they're very easily convinced, her and Maggie Smith, that this is not going to work for them. But all of that is like, oh, because another thing we didn't mention, the reason why Laura Linney hasn't been back in 40 years. And the narrative drags this shit on for a while.
But by the time that it is said, we can have figured it out based on time and location, and the fact that Maggie Smith has a dead son that she goes and pays tribute to on the seaside.
So basically, Laura Linney was in love with Maggie Smith's son, but got pregnant, and I guess because that was shameful.
And it would have been the 20s. Mm-hmm.
Laura Linney was sort of banished from the town. She ended up going to the United States to get an abortion.
Boston.
And then stayed there. And the son was told that Laura Linney didn't want anything to do with him. Like Maggie Smith told him that. So he ended up killing himself.
Out of despair.
So then there's been this dark cloud over these women all these years. So another thing we didn't mention is the film is very heavy-handed with this idea that the husbands of these women who left made it very clear that they can't leave the house. Like, women, stay home.
You can't leave your post.
You have to take care of these kids and cook. You can't do anything for yourself. But of course, they all left. Mm-hmm. And specifically, the younger lady, her husband told her, if you leave, don't even bother coming back. Mm-hmm. But we get a little like a very corny montage where all the men have to like cook and take care of the kids. And that's over the course of a long weekend, they've realized how valuable these women are to them.
That I could have done without that, or it should have been handled a bit better.
So when the women return, all the men are like, oh, we're so glad to see you now.
And it's worth noting that Kathy Bates' husband is played by Stephen Ray.
In the end, they return and it seems like all's well that ends well. Like, I guess, even though Kathy Bates still has breast cancer, Maggie Smith still has a short leg, the boy can't speak.
He speaks.
Oh, that's right.
None of them hear it.
That's right. And I don't know what reconciliation Laura Linney received.
She has learned the art of forgiveness.
Oh, sure. It just all seemed very watered down.
And then Dolly, we learn, blames herself for her son being mute because she attempted to have an abortion. But this is how we learn what Chrissie, Laura Linney, really did in Boston, which involved sitting in a vat of boiling brown liquor. Which is not a technique I've been familiar with, but that sounds very traumatic, and I feel like that is a good example of how the rest of the film doesn't kind of live up to kind of the trauma we're navigating for these ladies.
Okay, let me go through these notes. I thought the score was corny, like super corny. I feel like the tone is weird because based on the score and the cinematography and the fact that you have Maggie Smith and Kathy Bates, that it would have a comedic vibe to it, but it doesn't.
We can blame Edmund Butt for the score, who also just did the score for Daliland.
It's also not dramatic enough, so the only moment I got emotional was the very end. But the first 80 minutes are just kind of like, do-do-do-do-do. Even when they're talking about pretty serious stuff, it still felt kind of hokey. Mm-hmm.
I think everything is so obvious and sitting right on the surface.
Well, then my next note is about why Laura Linney's gone. It's like, well, obviously we need to know, so waiting for the ball to drop. I do agree that you can put the pieces together and figure out that there's, like, but I just feel like it's, like, the build-up to it is not worth what it ends up being. Because what it ends up being is a pretty traumatic thing. Like, this woman was banished from her town and shamed, ended up getting in a back alley abortion. Her man killed himself. I mean, the way it plays out, it doesn't feel that heavy.
Mm-hmm. And Laura Linney seems kind of pissed at first. It's almost like Ingrid Bergman in The Visit. Like, I've come back to wreak havoc.
The town they live in Ireland to where Lourdes is in France is like 1,000+ miles. And this is in the late 60s when they're on this raggedy bus. That would have been a very long trip. And the way it's shot is just like, oh, it's no big deal. And then when these women show up to Lourdes, it's almost like they're starting fresh. Like, y'all didn't talk on the bus. I feel like that's a mistake. We spend a lot of time in the beginning with these women trying to figure out how they're going to get there, and the singing competition, which I did not need. We could have used that time to sort of show them on this trip and maybe get some exposition that way, see their dynamic. But yeah, I thought it was really odd that the trip going there and coming back was just like from one scene to the next.
Because we don't care about it.
Again, the way it's played out for these men and how they don't know what to do is so annoying. You know what it's like when men go to like the salon or the like Sephora to pick up something for their wife, or even the grocery store to go get like,
and become automatic helpless children.
oh, it's so, oh, my wife needs this thing. Sir, you can't read? You can't see that skincare is right here? It's an alphabetical order.
To be fair, that is a thing that heterosexual men do tend to do. They can't be, they can't fuss with things that are deemed feminine. So
I know it's a real thing, but it's like, it's so ridiculous. Like, I can't take care of these kids. Like, so, what?
Well, and then it's also, it seems funny, like Stephen Ray, who I really like, but he has a daughter that lives at home. To me, like, a man that adamant about his wife never leaving would force his daughter to do the cooking.
That's like an adult lady living at home. Like, okay, then the younger lady, her husband tells her, if you leave, don't bother coming back. And she leaves with her mute son, but she leaves her other baby at home. I thought that was, I don't know what, my mom wouldn't have left me and then go take my sister knowing she can't come back. And then we get a scene where the dad is like trying to change the baby's diaper. And we see he works as like a repair person. Sir, you fixed like electronics or TVs, whatever he was doing, but you can't figure out how to secure a nappy so the baby doesn't shit all over the place.
You can't swaddle this kid.
Because then we see the baby walking and like just dropping shit bombs everywhere.
Which makes no sense because we see him putting that diaper on the kid and then it immediately shits after that. What were you doing? I don't know.
I just thought that was dumb.
Because it is.
Okay, when they get to Lourdes and it seems like there are hordes of people going. But then the way it plays out is like every single person gets to take like a personal bath. You
can schedule it. There's some dialogue about that. We're scheduled to do the baths.
They also give us dialogue about how the water, because obviously this water is not filtered and chlorinated. It's just like the water that's there. You couldn't pay me to get in that nasty water. And we know all these people have diseases and shit.
Maggie Smith's like, the Lord purifies it.
No, absolutely not. And then it's like, so they have to pay to do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think Jesus would have wanted you to pay for him. I mean, I just don't know.
Well, there's some commentary about that because there's a gift shop that the women are wandering around in, and Kathy Bates is kind of like, this seems kind of gimmicky.
Then she's the one who finds out about that really no miracles happen there. I just think if you believe in this so much that you risked everything to go, and then all it takes is like the one nun who works in the bathhouse telling you that miracles don't really happen, for you to just denounce all of it?
You will, usually I find that, yeah, it would seem that that person would find a way to make that narrative make sense to them still.
Okay, so the reason this movie is a no for me is I thought it was corny, the tone is off, and Kathy Bates and Laura Linney are supposed to be the same age. And they are like 17 years apart.
Okay.
And they look 17 years apart.
Yeah, it doesn't... And again, so this movie, they've been trying to make this movie for 17 years, the producers. And at that time, it was Maggie Smith and Kathy Bates attached, and then Joan Allen and Claire Danes. And so, you know, had that been made, Joan Allen and Kathy Bates would have been contemporaries. So I think that, you know, these are changes you need to make when everything coalesces, and we have Laura Linney and Kathy Bates. How can we... You could still make this work, but you just have to tweak the script a little, and I don't understand why they didn't do that.
Because it's so distracting. Every time they mention like how, because they act like they were like best girlfriends, and it's like, man, when this lady was 15, you were like 32 years. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. again, like the younger lady talking about how she attempted to have an abortion by soaking in like whiskey, or brown liquor. It just, I don't know, it should have hit different, but them sitting on the bed and like Maggie Smith and Kathy Bates looking at her like, yeah, tell us your business.
Confess to us.
Confess. I mean, the tone is off because it almost should be like these two vultures trying to get at her, but it doesn't. It just feels uncomfortable, like, because Laura Linney's telling her, don't tell these bitches your business.
Yeah, you don't need to do that.
You don't need to do this. So, again, it just felt very off to me.
But it feels off because you should feel that pressure more, and then the devastation of Chrissie having to say, like, now I have to save this girl by explaining what happened to me and how I know that what you attempted to do, you didn't even do it the right way.
So the three moments that made me kind of emotional were at the very end. It's when Laura Linney asks Maggie Smith, or Maggie Smith asks Laura Linney for forgiveness.
That is a very good scene.
That's a very sweet moment. Then when the ladies return home, even though it was super corny, like the younger lady's husband says, oh, you look different. I've been gone for 3 days, boo. I don't know how I look different. And then when Maggie Smith takes Laura Linney to her son's tomb, which is basically like on the side of like the ocean, like cliffside, because that's where he drowned. I thought that was a lovely moment.
Yeah.
But again, it's like I waited 80 minutes to get here.
And again, those are in those quiet, unfussy moments of humanity where I feel like we could have pared down some elements in the script about why we had to get here to do this and do that, and just focus on really what this is about is these women that have this trauma they're trying to reconcile.
We don't learn why. It also didn't make sense to me. Why didn't Maggie Smith want Laura Linney to marry her son? Because you're best friends with her mother, and it's the 1920s. Women were pregnant and got married at that age. So what about... And Laura Linney seems like a very smart, bright, beautiful young lady. Or would have been. So I don't understand... Like, they don't make it clear what was so bad about her.
What I was trying to piece together about that is she's very vehement towards Eileen because Eileen let the cat out of the bag that she was pregnant, and maybe socially she became a pariah because of that. And because girls got pregnant, but they got married around the same time so they could hide the fact that it was out of wedlock, that the conception happened.
Sure.
So again, I think that could have made sense had it been more clear. I don't know. It seemed a little ambiguous. I don't know.
My final note is that this felt like a old whack-ass 1960s white Irish lady waiting to exhale.
Oh, boy.
What would you give this movie?
And so much yellow.
Yeah, the color palette's interesting.
There's it's the swing and then...
But that's a good point, because it's so vibrant that it makes you think it might be like a lighthearted... You also said it felt like if you mix that movie with...
Dream Horse.
With Toni Collette, with Joyride, with Olivia Colman. Which were both super corny. But I could see someone like my mom thinking this movie is sweet.
Yes.
So there's an audience for it, but for me, no. What would you give it?
I would give it 2 out of 5.
I would give it 2 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.